The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Good morning, everybody. Hey, training camps are almost here. We've had some action happening around the country. Rookies have reported. It is time to talk about some actual real-life football that's going to be occurring. No more of this off-season dead zone. We've actually got gentlemen on the field and things to talk about. We're going to talk about the recent signings here that came up, and we'll look forward to all these training camp battles and things that we want to be watching from that. All that and more coming up right now on Belly Up Fantasy Live.
Jalen Reagor getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially, long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. Game time. Good morning, everybody. It is time for Belly Up Fantasy Live. I am Chase Thornton, coming to you from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar as per usual. But I am not alone today. We're going to bring in, again, our good friend, Kevin Wilson. Kevin, how are we doing this morning? Lots to talk about.
We have lots to talk about. And also, you might notice the Batman symbol right there. And he's right here. And also, he's right here. And so 84 years ago today, he made his first comic book appearance. So I'm a comic book junkie, always have been, never too old for comics. So I'm celebrating that day right here. And I've got a football jersey and Batman. And so I combined the two. And so I'm pretty jazzed up about that. And also to be talking about some football, and glad to be indoors because the heat dome endures. So.
84 years for Batman. I remember it like it was yesterday. At least I feel like it anyway. Awesome. All right. Yeah. You're dealing with heat down there. We had, I'm not kidding you. We had the hardest hailstorm I've ever personally been a part of up here. In my neck of the woods. And you drive around the neighborhood, not only are it looks like fall outside with all the leaves that were beat down out of the trees. But then you drive around town, you look at people's houses, and anybody that had vinyl siding or any kind of older like wooden siding just got it hammered away. It looked like their house got shot up. Shutters with slats missing and like hanging half off of houses, and windows broken all over the place, trees down. It was nuts. Cars just totaled everywhere. Everybody's got a picture on Facebook of their car, just, beat all to hell,
so
or
hopefully people have
sunroof smashed
on speed dial.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's time to, hopefully you're in good hands, because it really nailed everybody around here. Our local Walmart actually has a bunch of skylights in the ceiling.
Right. And
there's cell phone videos you can actually find online. I mean, you probably could find them actually if you just did the right Giggle search, but a bunch of them broke out during the storm. And so there's cell phone videos inside Walmart of like glass, whatever it is, I don't know what, but the skylight pieces falling from the ceiling, and then hail size of golf balls and bigger coming in and falling on. And then there's videos of the aftermath where they'll look down like the main aisle of Walmart, or like, one of the main walking aisles, and you can see the big puddle on the floor underneath the skylight, full just water and glass and hail. And then another 15, 20 feet down, you see another one, another 15, 20 feet behind that, just as far as you can see going to the back of the store, like where they all broke out. So it was a little bit of a hairy time, but we survived. Our house came through it okay. And we're still here. Yeah, we're still here to talk about some football. We'll have somebody come out and take a look at the roof, because we didn't get quite, we didn't quite come away unscathed, I don't think, but we didn't have any windows broken. The boys were scared. The little guys were scared, but we came out of it fine. So you haven't melted, and we weren't pounded by the hail. So
it's a win all the way around.
Right. Yeah. Hey, right now. And we've got some football to actually talk about this week. Kind of funny, last week we talked about some of the guys that had not signed. We were talking about, some of their situations. And then mere minutes after we got off the air, DeAndre Hopkins finally bit the bullet and signed. Hopkins signs a 2-year deal, $26 million. He can get up to another 6 or so up to about $32 million with incentives, but he signs a 2-year contract with Tennessee, the Titans. He will automatically go there now and be their number one wide receiver, as he would have been in let's be honest, most of the teams in the league right now. But 2-year, $26 million in Tennessee, after the rumors of visits and offers from the Patriots and interest from the Bills and the Chiefs. Maybe that interest was more on the fantasy analyst side than in real life, but we had what we thought were some more exciting destinations for him, and he ends up in Tennessee. What's your reaction? First off, what was your initial reaction to DeAndre Hopkins signing in Tennessee as we crack one open and get it started?
All right. So my initial reaction, and I as we talked pregame, I wish that this had come out while we were, live last week, because everybody's already talked about this.
Yep.
But when it comes to DeAndre Hopkins, if he tells you that the sky is blue, you better go out and check it for yourself, because his credibility is shot in my eyes. And my analysis when we first talked about this was based on the things that he said out of his own mouth, that he's looking for a team that's got a solid quarterback, solid coaching staff, and solid defense, which Tennessee has none of that. And so it was all about the money, which is fine. Let's say that. Just be upfront and say that. Hey, I'm looking for the best deal. And so I would have a completely different reaction. But he himself said he was looking for the 3-point plan, which after he didn't sign for 2-3 weeks, whatever I knew was bull crap. But it certainly confirmed that, signing with Tennessee confirms every bit of that bull crap. And so, like I said, if he, especially, when you talk about all the hell, he might have went outside today. It's a blue sky out there. So you definitely want to confirm whatever he says. As I'm a big fan of NCIS, and Leo Jeffrey Gibbs always would say, trust but verify. Well, the trust is out the window, but so verify still must happen. So anything he says must be verified going forward.
Gibbs from NCIS. There's a reference for you, everybody. All right. Hey, we both had kind of felt like that and talked about that. It's not about the money. They all say that, but hey, like you just said, I just told you guys he signed an 8-figure contract. I've never had to deal with 8 figures in my life.
No.
And I don't think there's any shame in being like, hey, I can get 8 figures from these guys and 7 from somebody else.
Talent, make every dollar you can. I have no problem with that. But don't say one thing when you know exactly that's not true.
It's okay for the NFL to be a business for some dudes. Not everybody. I mean, for people, for the layperson, the fan who looks at it from afar, who has never realistically been in a chance to be in that kind of position in football or as a rock star or movie star or whatever else. It's easy to look at that from the outside, say, I love this so much, I would play for so much less than that, and to understand that, even the veterans minimum is life-changing money for a very good portion of people watching. But it's easy to look at that from the outside and make those kinds of judgments, like, oh, how could that guy do that? Or, whatever. Why wouldn't he go and try and win a ring in Buffalo? The dude has been on playoff teams in his life.
Not many, but he's been on it.
Not many, but he's been on playoff teams. Apparently that's not the biggest thing for him, and that's okay. That's his job.
Fine. That's totally fine, like I said, but
just come out and say that, then, dude.
Absolutely adamant, about his 3-point plan, and it was all nonsense.
he has he has an outside chance to win the AFC South.
That's
He
because
won't
that
be going.
division is so sorry. That's the only reason why.
He won't be going much farther than that, even if they do.
No,
At least unless something crazy happens this season, because right now they're a fringe contender in their own division. And like you just said, it's not necessarily because they're so good. It's because the rest of the division is, I mean, half the division is in rebuild mode, literally.
right? They all have quarterbacks and everything else. And so one thing I would say that because of this signing, Ryan Tannehill, Tennessee don't make this move if they're starting a rookie quarterback. So Will Levis not starting this year. Unless something happens to Ryan Tannehill.
Well, there you go. That's where we want to head with this. We want to talk about the fantasy implications here.
Right.
And for one, Tannehill gets a bad rap. I think a lot of people, because he's not flashy, he's not exciting, because he wasn't the second coming of Dan Marino in Miami.
Yeah, top of his game, he was never flashy.
No,
but he could get the job done.
He's solid enough.
Father Time now, so Father Time is undefeated, and his stock raises because of DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think it raises it a whole lot, though.
No, he's still not an exciting option, even in a 2-quarterback format. He's not an exciting option, but he's solid. He's one of those guys that you could draft like in a best ball league.
Bring him on the horizon. He does bring him on the horizon, of being a legitimate fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, he's a solid player. He doesn't. He's not going to overwhelm you, but he still can. He makes the plays that he has to make in that offense. We know they're going to run the ball with Derrick Henry.
Right.
We know that's what they want to run their offense through. But Tannehill can get the job done. And as a second quarterback, say, or a third quarterback on like on a best ball league,
I think you're all right if he's your third. Because
he's one of those guys that can
3 quarterbacks.
He'll just give you steady production, not great, not exciting, but he'll give you steady enough production there. And with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins now, there is some flash potential in that offense.
There was none of that before. There is some now.
No, there is some opportunity now for some bigger, some bigger looks in that. Now, I mean, Tannehill is not going to blow anybody's lights out. He didn't have a single game last season where he was over 20 fantasy points. Now, he had some issues at the end of the season there with his injuries and that, but this raises his profile a little bit. What does it do though to you? What does it signal about the other receivers? What does this do for your Treylon Burke feelings? What does this do for your Chigo Okonkwo? What does this do for Kyle Phillips, Nick Westbrook-Akina?
Except for the tight end, all these guys that you just mentioned, Treylon Burks, he had a horrible year a year ago. And people were saying, and I wasn't necessarily buying it, that he was going to step up this year. Well, the step up is now step even because he's not going to raise himself. And so if it's not a step up, it's a step down, perhaps. And so I want nothing to do whatever in fantasy with Treylon Burks, especially in redraft. I don't want anything to do with him whatsoever.
Yeah. I think it really depresses his value in like a redraft format, like you said. I'm still willing to take a shot on him in best ball, but now it's much more whereas before he was kind of on the wide receiver 3 with a possibility to surprise and be a real good value as a wide receiver 2. I think this pushes him down farther to like a 4 or 5. He's still rosterable in a best ball format. I'm not excited about him from a redraft standpoint
at all.
I'm not getting rid of him in Dynasty. He's still the younger, obviously the younger of the two.
So that would be silly to do that.
He still has an opportunity to grow with Will Levis, who I agree with you. I think this signals much more of a we're still trying to compete. We're still going for it this year. The only way Tannehill doesn't start for them this year, I believe now, is if he completely collapses.
He completely collapses or he's hurt.
Right. And that's fine. I mean, some of the reports that we've seen coming out of camp are that, and as you would expect, Tannehill is head and shoulders above Will Levis and Malik Willis at this point. He should be. He's been in the league since those guys were born, just about.
Right. Noah,
Ark,
not. Noah's Ark came to rest, and
Tannehill jumped off and started throwing a football around.
That's about it.
But I agree with you. Yeah, Burks, it depresses his value for me. Chigakonkwo is one that I'm interested to see how this affects.
I like that still.
We like him, and he was pretty much the consensus number 2 on this team in terms of receiving, in terms of targets, in terms of, we all thought we were going into this year looking for a big breakout year from Chigakonkwo, if you didn't consider last year necessarily a breakout. But now you add DeAndre Hopkins to the mix, and now DeAndre Hopkins is a guy who you can throw to in the red zone because he's so good at contested catches. DeAndre Hopkins isn't the guy that's going to work himself open. He's going to run a great route, find himself open by 10 yards, Tyreek Hill style, and then you get him the ball in traffic, out of traffic, and he just takes off. That's not DeAndre Hopkins. Never really has been. And it still isn't. He wins contested balls because he's so strong. He concentrates so well at the point of attack there. But in the red zone, that plays really, really well. Obviously, they'll be able to throw to him all over the field. But Chigakonkwo now, does that take away some of what he was slated for in that offense when we thought he was the number 2? He's now pretty clearly the number 3 option in that passing attack. And it's a passing attack that they don't necessarily want to use as much as other teams because they want to run the offense through Derrick Henry.
Right. And as the tight end, though, I think that given that offense that they will probably want to throw some check downs and things like that. And so the tight end could play into that.
He still plays into it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he still plays into that. So might step him back just a little bit, but not a whole lot. So if I am one of those guys that I'm not getting the tight end, I'm not getting Travis Kelce most likely, or one of those guys way up in the draft, and probably not. But if later in the draft he's floating around, I could see it happening.
I'm not as excited for him in redraft, unfortunately, as I was coming into this.
But still excited.
But best ball wise,
I would.
Best ball wise, he is still worth. I don't want him necessarily as my top option right now. Then
no,
in best ball, but he still has that explosive athleticism and that potential, and he will still go. He'll still find himself games where he's the guy that got open and went off. I like him as my tight end 2 in a best ball format where we're not picking up guys for the rest of the year. We have to set ourselves. He's a good shot play to take. Especially if you can get yourself a guy that is going to give you a solid floor, just good, solid, steady production at the tight end, which is hard to find, but not impossible.
No, it's not impossible.
If you find yourself one of those guys, a good guy that's just a steady floor guy, so you're going to have at least that base of points from the position, Okonkwo's a nice guy to take so that every couple of weeks you can get that spike in production there and keep yourself competitive in a best ball format. I think it's not great for Kyle Phillips, who looked really good last year when he played. Again, another guy that was hurt. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, I think this pretty much ends his fantasy usefulness, at least for the time being.
The train's not coming out of the station for him.
Yeah, no. But Kyle Phillips, a guy that had been getting a little bit of look and a little bit of run, like say in dynasty formats and that, because he is young, and because he looked good last year when he played. They now have a pretty legitimate 3 deep wide receiver room between Hopkins and Burks and Phillips. 2/3 of that is young. Yeah. Okonkwo's young. They've got Will Levis waiting to take over at quarterback. They drafted Tyjae Spears, who is not as young as some, but is younger than Derrick Henry and can be exciting. The only thing they don't have
Derrick Henry, so that's not saying a whole lot.
The only thing they don't have on this offense pretty much right now, unfortunately, is an offensive line. And for a team that wants to run the ball, that's a problem.
Right. And Derrick Henry is one of those guys that he's going to get contact.
Right.
And so, and that's his whole game. And so, you want to limit that contact until hopefully he's beyond the line of scrimmage. If he's getting hit before that, Tennessee's going to have a problem.
And he is getting older. He is getting
He is
older. I
getting
don't
older.
want to, and he's still effective. But
Yep. I'm
his
not
second
concerned
half
about
production
age.
last year suffered.
Yeah.
And some
Not
of that you have to
concerned about
wonder.
age with him just yet, at least not this year.
You have to wonder if his production in the second half of games last year was not as stellar as it had been, and it was not up to the par of his
stellar, so.
But so you have to ask yourself then: is it because he's getting older? Is it because the line was so terrible? Is it because there was no threat of the pass necessarily last year, or very little of it, especially after Tannehill went down with his injury? Malik Willis brought nothing to the table in terms of that.
Brought absolutely nothing.
So something to watch there. But D-Hop is there in Tennessee, so we've all got that to look forward to this season so far. Another kind of a surprise signing that happened here before we go to our first commercial break here. Melvin Gordon signs a 1-year incentive-laden $3.1 million deal with Baltimore, with the Ravens. Now, Melvin Gordon, one of the 896 running backs on the market that had not been signed yet, and then goes and signs in a place where they had all three of their top running backs back from last season.
Right. Unlike a year ago when they didn't have any healthy.
When everybody was coming on, everybody on their roster who played running back was coming off a gigantic mega knee injury the season before. They didn't know how many people were going to be healthy, if anybody was going to be able to start the season, who was going to be going for them. But they return J.K. Dobbins, they return Gus Edwards, they return Justice Hill, but they go out and they sign Melvin Gordon. Does this comes it came in the beforehand of this announcement, but then the announcement comes out after they sign Gordon that they are placing J.K. Dobbins on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list.
I saw that.
And there's several different iterations of that list, I believe, but he's on it right now. Everything I've seen from it says that that's more or less precautionary. He'll be able to practice at any time they want him to. But it's just right now they're keeping him off the field. They're going to kind of handle him with kid gloves. He is still recovering from that injury.
They can put on their roster while he's doing it.
Right. So do you see this more as that kind of a depth signing, or do you see this as any kind of, coach speak writing on the wall kind of thing, that they maybe are a little more worried about their situation than they've let on? Or what's your interpretation right now of the Gordon to Baltimore signing?
Well, my reaction is kind of like, we were talking, with the hail, it's, it's kind of like, the hail's already happened, so you're trying to get an insurance policy. So that insurance policy may not mean a whole lot. And so for me, Melvin Gordon does not move the fantasy needle at all.
Not anymore.
No. Not anymore. Hasn't for a while now. And I read the same thing about that PUP list that you saw. And right after that, it was like, well, don't be concerned. He will be on the field, and I think J.K. Dobbins is a guy that I expect some things out of him coming into this year. And so, as you mentioned, 878 running backs, and so he might be there just to carry some footballs in the preseason. If he looks good, okay, he can make the team, but I would not be surprised if he's not on their opening day roster.
Well, he's a very experienced and formerly very effective player at that position. If they want to let Dobbins take it easy, if they want to let Gus Edwards, who is still, like we said, coming off his own major injury,
these guys take it easy. As we
if
mentioned,
you want to let them take it easy, you've got a guy
injuries
here in Gordon who knows how to play the position, will come in, can be a professional right away, knows how to acclimate himself, conduct himself in training camp, get himself going. It's a guy that you can teach the offense to. And like you said, if he performs this preseason, okay, you keep him. You're not out a ton of money. If not,
no.
or if you're not worried about Dobbins and Edwards and Hill, maybe you cut Gordon loose, but you've got him on speed dial, you've got him on the bat phone, so
That's
that
right,
if
the bat
something
phone.
happens, you can bring him in right away and he jumps right into your system. Now there's been some talk. I mean, we know this is an offense that wants to run the ball a ton, but part of how they run the ball a ton is with their quarterback, Lamar Jackson. So between Lamar Jackson running the ball in the red zone a lot, between Todd Monken coming in now as the new offensive coordinator, between adding Odell Beckham, drafting Zay Flowers, getting Rashad Bateman back healthy, having Mark Andrews as one of the best tight ends in football, there's been a lot of talk about people worrying about Dobbins from a fantasy standpoint this season because this team might throw more. And when they do run, you've always got that looming specter of Lamar Jackson taking the meaty runs away. Are you downgrading J.K. Dobbins at all going into this season? Are you in on him? Are you just taking him where he falls to you? What's your thoughts on J.K. Dobbins right now as we talk about the Baltimore Ravens?
I'm a little bit higher than J.K. Dobbins than a lot of people are. And I don't if he's the number one running back on the Baltimore Ravens, even with Lamar Jackson, the number one running back on Baltimore means something because they routinely lead the league in rushing, even though that is the quarterback doing a lot of that. But the lead running back will get his yards, will get his rushing attempts, and he will get some TDs. But if he's healthy and he's a guy that you can get a little later in the draft, I think there's upside here. If, like we said, if he's on the field when we're drafting, whatever day that is that we're doing our draft in our belly up league, and he's sitting there in the later rounds, he's got to come on to Team Wilson.
Yeah, no, I like J.K. Dobbins. I agree with you. I think I'm higher on him than a lot of people are. He's been so remarkably, he's been consistently above average and above efficient when in his career, when he's been healthy and when he's actually played, been on the field. And as you said, it's the lead running back for a team that we know is effective running the football. And
right,
yes,
and
a lot of that comes from Lamar Jackson.
Rushing.
I like him as a wide. I think he's a running back too, clear cut running back too. But I think he has explosive potential to.
But he's going out in drafts. He's going behind some of these other guys that are running back too.
Oh yeah,
and so that to me, there's value here.
He's got the potential to sneak into that 12-13 range where he's a borderline RB1. And like you said, if you're getting him at a depressed price, and you get that kind of thing out of him, he's a nice shot to take. Whether it's best ball, whether it's redraft, I like J.K.
by
Dobbins.
Draft day, I'm okay.
No, I'm a big fan of J.K. Dobbins. I've got quite a bit of exposure to him in my dynasty leagues. Best ball, not as much, just because of his ADP and where he's fallen to. It feels like every time I sign up for a best ball draft, which is multiple times daily lately, I'm drafting from like 8 through 11. I'm always on the back half of that. I literally think I have two best ball drafts that I've done so far where I've been in the top 3. I think I had the top pick in one, and I think I had the number 3 in another one. Otherwise, like I've been drafting, all my best ball drafts have happened just as how the cookie crumbles. I've been in the bottom half of my drafts. So I don't have a ton of the very, very top receivers. I don't have a ton of Jefferson. I don't have a ton of Chase. I don't have a ton of McCaffrey, say, that kind of thing. But so based on where I've been drafting, just some of these guys, some guys just haven't fallen to me, or I haven't taken the leap to go get them. But I don't have a ton of Dobbins, but I am completely comfortable with Dobbins on my team. And I don't think that Melvin Gordon changes anything about that. I think he is completely done. Now, 2 years ago, when these guys got hurt and they were signing, who they brought in
They almost
Latavius
brought in-
Murray.
They almost brought in me. That's how bad
They had.
were
I
up
think
there.
didn't they sign Le'Veon Bell. I think for a while they had him on their roster at least. But
Yeah.
they brought in Latavius Murray. They were bringing all
Yeah.
these like aged
Any running
guys.
back who could get out of his car and walk into the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on down.
If you'd ever had a football card printed, they called you. But like 2 years ago, yeah, this is the kind of thing where like Melvin Gordon could have worked his way into kind of a sneaky,
Right.
know,
Until he got
usable
hurt
and
himself. So,
yeah. But this year, in the absence of any of those kinds of injuries to Edwards and Dobbins, I'm not over. I mean, this isn't going to make me rush out, and I'm not going to add Melvin Gordon at the end of best ball drafts thinking I'm being sneaky. He's not on my redraft radar. He'll be on waivers, and then
yeah,
if
it'd
and
definitely
when
be
something
on waivers.
happens,
So-
then we look into him. So yeah, it didn't necessarily move the needle, but it was definitely something for the talking heads like us to discuss for a few minutes at least. All
There we have
right,
it.
let's take our ad spot here from Manscaped, and when we come back on the other side, we'll talk about just a couple more of the kind of popcorn signings that happened this week, and then we're going to move on and we'll talk about training camps that have opened up and that are opening up this week, and talk about what we're excited to see from them and what we're looking for from a fantasy perspective to see what happens in these. But first, like we said, let's hear from our good friends over at Manscaped.
Spring has sprung, and our friends at Manscaped have the best tools for some spring cleaning. They've already helped you tidy up all the nooks and crannies of your body's basement. But this year, Manscaped can help you get the perfect presentation on that beautiful face with the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. Make sure you look your best this spring by using code BELLY20 to get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. So tame your mane with the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. The sun is peeking back out, which means you'll have to show your face in the daylight again. So use the kit to make sure your scruff looks award-winning, whether you have glorious beard flow or some smooth, sleek cheeks. Save 20% off and free shipping with the code BELLY20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code BELLY20 at manscaped.com. Focus on the face and use the Beard Hedger Pro Kit for the cleanest look in the game.
All right. Yep. Get yourself over there. Use that code BELLY20. Get yourself 20% off over at Manscaped. And hey, look sharp like Kevin and myself. All right. So a couple of interesting signings for the New York Giants here this week. First off, they bring in Cole Beasley.
I saw that.
Yeah. Okay. Cole Beasley now reunites with Brian Daboll. Daboll was the offensive coordinator in Buffalo when Beasley was there and had his career best, something like 967 yards, give or take one or two. But his career best in yardage happened with Brian Daboll as the offensive coordinator there in Buffalo. Cole Beasley, a guy that wasn't signed to start the year last year, but then was brought back in eventually to try and help out Buffalo there in the slot area. But as we have kind of hammered on nauseum Fantasy Live, the New York Giants have a ton of needs on their team, but slot capable wide receiver is not necessarily one of them.
Yeah, they have
just about everyone on their roster. And it's hyperbole until you look at it and realize that it's not necessarily hyperbole. Just about every receiver that they have of any note on their roster is a guy who has or does or can play in the slot. They signed Jamison Crowder, career slot guy. They bring in now Cole Beasley, career slot guy. They have Wan'Dale Robinson that they drafted and haven't been able to use much because of his injuries. He's a slot guy. They draft Jalen Hyatt, a guy who, again, does a lot of work out of the slot and can work a lot out of the slot there. Sterling Shepard they have who can and has worked out as a Paris Campbell. They've got a ton of guys on that roster with name recognition at the receiver position. Even Isaiah Hodgins, who was essentially their lead receiver, their best receiver from last season. Even Isaiah Hodgins, is more kind of a slot guy. They've got Darius Slayton, who's an outside dude. Okay, good. Excellent.
Yeah,
everybody else, there's some kind of question about. And it's an interesting signing for me to bring in a guy who's that big of that long tenured of a vet. who you know is just a slot guy. Cole Beasley is not in any way, shape, or form going to line up on the outside. Cole Beasley's probably not on the field when you're throwing the Hail Mary and you need all the, the big bodies and those guys. He's just not. But neither is really anybody else on their roster. So what do we make of this Giants receiving room? Are we excited in any way, shape, or form about Cole Beasley signing the Giants, or about anybody right now on this Giants receiving core? What's your feelings there, Kevin?
Well, you use the word excited, which, it's kind of like the match after you poured water on it. So no, I'm excited about none of these guys. And you talk about, 7 slot wide receivers. You know what that means? You don't have one. That's what it says to me.
Yeah, the problem for him, right, like you said, right now the problem is you have 7 slot guys or 800 slot guys, which means you don't have one who's the main guy.
You don't have one.
And it also means then that you don't have anybody on the outside.
Right. And it's kind of like if you have, you got 3 guys going up, for your quarterback's position, means you don't have one.
You don't have one.
And it's the same thing here. And so none of these guys and the wide receiver and the Giants, none of them excite me at all. Somebody's got to have to catch passes, but Waller is about the only one, and he's the tight end, of course.
And that's interesting. You bring him up, and you make a good point. Darren Waller is probably the overall most talent. Darren Waller and Saquon Barkley, weirdly enough, are probably the 2 most talented pass receivers on that team right now.
Right. I don't think that's really open to debate.
No, I mean, we've seen what Saquon can do as a receiving running back. We've seen Darren Waller.
That's where his value lies.
Yeah. And Darren Waller is a top receiving threat at the position and has been a top in fantasy. He's been a top 2-3 type guy. He's been that level below Travis Kelce here when healthy.
Right.
And so, and then the interesting thing about, like you had brought up a little bit earlier about the idea of check down receivers and that slot receiver working underneath, working on the inside. That's what tight ends do. That's what your running backs
do. That's right. So
they've already got guys who can do that.
Might actually negatively affect Waller because they don't have anybody to stretch that defense. So there's my concern.
They don't have a ton on the outside.
And so, so they need to get some guys that can play on the outside who could stretch that offense, but they don't have any of them.
I'm not excited about Beasley. I should say about Cole Beasley. I'm not necessarily. No. I'm not worried about the idea of Sterling Shepard. He's a talented guy. Sterling Shepard is one of those guys.
Yeah,
he'll be love to have on my real life football team.
Right.
I don't need anything from him in fantasy, and you don't know if he's going to be healthy.
Right.
Darius Slayton will play on the outside for him. He was very consistent when he played last season. Not a shoot the lights out kind of guy, though. Isaiah Hodgins was a surprise. Isaiah Hodgins is a guy that I have a ton of exposure to in best ball because, like you said, somebody's got to catch passes for this team. It's not literally always going to be Darren Waller. We don't know necessarily if Saquon Barkley is how much he's going to play or how into it he's going to be.
If Saquon Barkley doesn't play, all of this collapses.
So Isaiah Hodgins
collapses.
Isaiah Hodgins being their lead guy from last year, essentially. I've got a lot of exposure to him in the lower halves of my drafts and my best ball drafts because, hey, if I've got an opportunity to get someone's number 1 wide receiver as my wide receiver 6, 7, I'll take that. A team's leading receiver as your 5th, 6th, 7th string backup is okay in my book. Plus, I've got a lot of Daniel Jones. I'm in on Daniel Jones this year. Despite the ragtag group that he has to throw to, I think I think he's going to be his consistency, his efficiency is going to continue to get better. And I've already said I've beat the drum on this for 2 years now that Daniel Jones is one of the best running quarterbacks in the entire league, and you need to
Nobody
take that
can
into
openly
effect.
debate that.
No, he is
Yeah.
in my
If you want to
opinion,
debate that, please let us know, and we'll get you on the show.
in my
will.
opinion, you can like him, you can hate him, you can want him on your team, you can not, but Daniel Jones is a top 10 fantasy quarterback right now. He just is. Sorry if you don't like that idea, or if you want to make fun of that idea or whatever, but the fact is that he is a top 10. He was number 9. He was number 9 in scoring last year. He was number 9 in scoring last year, and he did not, he had not career year in football.
No.
He well, scored a ton that way, but I mean, he did not shoot the lights out in terms of his passing numbers. He only had 15 passing season. His career high was his rookie year with 24, but he also only threw 5 interceptions last season, which is the fewest of his career, despite having a career high in pass attempts and pass completions. So his efficiency jumped by leaps and bounds last season under Brian Daboll. I know that he doesn't have anybody exciting to throw to this year, but who the hell did he have exciting to throw to last year?
Nothing.
Kenny Galladay? No. Kenny Galladay, he couldn't throw to him half the time because he wasn't in the field. So he wasn't throwing to any season either. And he still was the number 9 fantasy quarterback. What all do we need to see from him before people, will admit that, hey, Daniel Jones has something to offer you from a fantasy standpoint? Are they going to win the Super Bowl with him? I don't know. Maybe he keeps getting better under Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll was a great hire for that team. But I love Daniel Jones in fantasy. And because of that, in best ball, when I have him in best ball, I'm looking to make a stack with him. If I haven't gotten Waller, which I haven't in quite a few leagues, what's the next best stack with him? Well, Isaiah Hodgins was his leading receiver last season, and he's got as good a chance to come out of this as anybody, because I think they will put Hodgins on the outside. He can play slot, but I think Hodgins and Slayton will be on the outside for them. And I think they'll let the other 896 guys battle it out for the slot number 3 position. But somebody's going to have to catch passes for that team. And when it's not Barkley, when it's not Waller, I think Isaiah Hodgins is as good a bet as anybody else. How are you handling the Saquon Barkley situation in terms of best ball drafts, in terms of going into redraft season? What are you thinking about Saquon Barkley right now? How are you handling it?
The way I'm handling it is I want nothing to do with Saquon Barkley, which is a sad statement because he is one of the top quality players in the NFL. Absolutely. And I've done some mock drafts, I'm sure, just as you, and you actually are doing actual drafts, which I am not doing at this point. But anyway, he is still going in the first round, which is mind-blowing to me, given the information that we do have that, he didn't sign a long-term deal. He doesn't want that franchise tag. And so he might as well, he's going to stay away from training camp. He might not play games. And so that is, as I mentioned last week, that's way too much uncertainty to have a guy who is going to go as high as he is, even if he slips to the second round. That's still that I'm not. I don't want anything to do with him, to be quite honest about it.
All right, I am taking the opposite tack, to be dead honest with you. I am using your attitude, which is honestly a popular attitude right now in the industry and in the industry, but also in fandom and just the regular layperson who does this too. You're not off base with that. There are a lot of people, experts and otherwise, who agree with that completely. I am trying to use that to get myself maybe a little bit of separation then. In these best ball tournaments, these big best ball tournaments, your best ball mania 4 types and those things. If Barkley is going to slip, if guys are going to pass on him because they're uncertain about this. Like you just said, like I've said, like nobody can really debate. He's one of the top guys when he's out there and when he's healthy. As I said last week,
he was healthy a year ago, so
yeah, and he was great.
That does not concern me. Health does not concern me.
No, I'm not as worried about that with him anymore as I was. I'm less worried that Saquon's going to get hurt than I am, say, about Christian McCaffrey. But I'm not shying away from Christian McCaffrey if he's available either at the right place. But if people are going to let Saquon drop, if this news here surrounding him is going to cause his ADP to fall, if he's going to come to me at more advantageous spots, I am more willing to jump on a guy like that right now in these big tournament formats and these best ball formats, because we know he has that potential. He has number 1 running back overall potential. He has that potential.
No question about that.
And if guys are going to let him fall, if I can get a more rock solid option, say in round 1, but he comes around to me in round 2, and he's still there, or even somehow round 3, if he's still around, I will jump on that.
If he's at the back end of the second round, I'm all in on that.
I have not taken him in the first yet.
Turn of the second round, then I'm still not going to. I'm not biting. If he's at the top of the second round, I'm not biting on him.
I have not taken him in the first round yet, but I have taken him in the second round whenever I've seen him, pretty much, because I just think that he's too good a possibility to pass up. And as I said last week, the simplest and most likely explanation right now, the most likely scenario right now, the way I see it, the most likely thing that happens is the guy plays week 1. He's on the field week 1. And if he's on the field, I want him on my team.
Absolutely.
So I'm not worried about that
until the Sunday before the season.
I mean, I've got pretty standard exposure to him right now. I think I've got somewhere between 16 and 20% exposure to him right now, which is kind of high. But I'm willing to take that shot with him, because if it pays off, if he is on the field and I got him at that kind of discount, I'll take that all day. So I'm not worrying. I'm not letting the Barkley news affect me. Now, as we get closer to the season, as more comes out, or we see more, or we get a more concrete idea of what his plans are, my opinion may change in light of, like, say, redraft. But for best ball right now, I am willing to take that shot, because if he pans out, he pans out. If he doesn't pan out, well, it was as good a shot as anybody else.
That we're talking about signings, and the Giants signing Robinson says to me they think he might miss games.
I think they definitely the James Robinson signing to me definitely says that they are trying to add some depth right now, and they are trying to protect themselves.
They needed that.
They did.
And James Robinson, despite the fact just 2 years ago he was a 1,000-yard guy, but he has taken a step back every year since then. And
Achilles injury is not something easy to come back from. Now, he looked good right away last year. He looked really good last year right away with the Jaguars. They let him go. The Jets picked him up. They didn't do much with him. The Patriots signed him here in this offseason and let him go like about 8 minutes later.
Yeah.
So they obviously weren't excited with what they saw of him. But like you just said, we've seen James Robinson be that guy in the past.
And he can be. And
we know he can be. We know he can catch the ball. We know he can run the ball. This is a team with Matt Breida, Gary Brightwell, and the recently drafted in the, I believe, 5th round, Eric Gray, behind Barkley on the depth chart. So they've got a young guy that they drafted. Brightwell has been nothing special since they brought him in. Matt Breida is Matt Breida. Graduated, I think, a few years after me, but not many. So I mean, he's not necessarily like a young, exciting option anymore behind Saquon.
Not young and not exciting.
So James Robinson, there is a spot for him on this team if he can seize it.
yes, if he's healthy, he's got a spot. And if anything goes sideways with Saquon Barkley, he can step right in for him.
Right. So I mean, I thought this was a good signing. It
I
doesn't
did too.
it doesn't change my rankings, doesn't move my needle in
No,
terms of I'm
no,
not
he's-
changing my
He's
opinion
the
on
guy
Barkley,
that-
positive
yeah,
or negative.
You can get him off the waivers
No.
more than likely. And so, but I would right after the draft is over, I definitely
It's got to look at. It's got to
know,
look at.
watching.
Yeah. Click that star, put
So,
him on your watch list. He's
absolutely,
definitely a guy to keep
absolutely.
on the radar right now.
Especially if he misses, let's say, he pulls an Emmitt Smith and misses the 2 first games, then I want him on my roster.
There is an opening for someone here to really, especially whether he shows up to camp or not. They're not playing Saquon Barkley in
No.
meaningful preseason snaps.
No. Yeah.
You don't
Only
need
thing
to
I
get
need
him
to
a ton
know
of
is-
run with your offense.
Yeah.
He knows
Only
what
thing
he's
I need to
doing.
know with Saquon Barkley is that he's in camp.
Yeah.
That's
So there is
Not
an
that he's
opportunity
playing in
here.
games because they don't do that anymore anyway. But
Eric
and
Gray
him.
as
That's all I
a
need to know.
as a draftee and James Robinson as a still young new signee, I think are interesting options. I have taken Eric Gray in 1 or 2 best ball drafts just on that off chance because there's a path there. There's a path to relevancy there in that Giants backfield. I am not discounting Saquon Barkley because of this situation, but I am letting it color my opinion of these other guys in this New York backfield. And I'm willing to take a shot here and there on either Gray or now maybe even Robinson as a guy to emerge from there. I don't necessarily care about Matt Breida or Gary Brightwell. I don't know. I don't want to take a shot on them. But Eric Gray, being a young guy, being an unknown, being a draftee, and have a pathway to relevancy, Eric Gray's a guy I'm willing to take a shot on late in a best ball draft. Let's take our second ad read real quick. When we come back on the other side, we talked about the Giants backfield kind of situation here and their receiver situation, but there are a ton of other position groups to be watching for as training camps get open this week. We'll talk about that on the other side here. But at first, let's listen to Ryan. He'll tell us about the good folks over at Geek.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan from No Credentials Required to talk to you about one of our newest partners at Belly Up Sports, SeatGeek. Yeah, live sports is great on television, but the feeling of being at the arena is a priceless experience. That's why our friends at SeatGeek are there to help you find the best tickets at the best prices. Not only can you get tickets to sporting events, we can also get tickets to concerts, comedy shows, musicals, and more. Search for your desired event now at SeatGeek.com, enter promo code BellyUpSports at checkout, and you save $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek. Life's an event. We have the tickets.
Yes, so get out there. Oh, hey, come on now. Keep it PG. It's a family show, Kevin. It's a family show.
Okay.
Get over there to
go.
SeatGeek and get yourself some tickets to
We're
something in
back
life.
online. Okay.
There we go. We are back. I'll tell you what, the Earthrider Hakan Honeybach is going down really well. But I'm fixing to crack open for those of you who are big Lebowski fans, about to crack open his dudeness there with the Lebowski sweater and the bowling ball and the cassette tapes, the Creedence. So good stuff there. But yeah, so we just talked about the New York Giants and their wide receiver position battle, their running back situation. Training camps are opening this week. Now, we've already had 9 teams that opened up on the 18th last week with their rookies coming in. Falcons, the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Saints, the Giants, the 49ers, all had rookies in camp. The Jets and the Browns are playing in the Hall of Fame game on August 3rd, so they were allowed to bring in their whole teams earlier than everybody else because they have to get ready for a game before everybody else. Jets had everybody there last Wednesday. The Browns had their rookies come in Wednesday. Everybody reported on Friday. And now coming up this week, most teams will have everybody in camp by the 25th or the 26th.
I think all the teams will. won't they?
Yeah. So, I mean, if they don't already have people in facility,
Camps will be hopping.
we will be in wide open here by Wednesday. We will be wide open in the NFL by Wednesday.
Right.
So, we're going to have stuff to watch. We're going to have news coming out. We're
will.
going to see guys.
We will.
Unfortunately, guys are going to get hurt, but we're going to see other guys sign. We're going to see guys who are impressing the coaches. And so can this rookie, win a starting spot, or can this veteran who signed for the minimum take a position? So going around the league right now and looking at some of the more interesting position battles, situations, whatever you want to call them. Is there one situation across the league right now in terms of a position battle or group that you yourself are excited about to start with? Is there one that you're like, yeah, let's get this going? Or are you just kind of like the rest of us waiting for a headline to hit?
Well, hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder right here, but I'm looking forward to the Green Bay Packers in camp, and the receiver battles that are going to be going on there, because they got Jaden Reed is in camp. What is his name? Luke Musgrave is in camp. They're signed, and so they've got a lot of receivers. They're all young, and I've got a lot of exposure to Jordan Love in my dynasty leagues. So I am looking forward to seeing just how this receiver room shakes out for the Packers, and who is going to be. You imagine Christian Watson's their number one receiver, but and Dobbs, and who after that, and how they're with who does Jordan Love like to throw to? So that's all going to be interesting to me, and I'm certainly looking forward to that. And people probably expected I was going to say my Seattle Seahawks, which I am looking forward to that as well. But that wide receiver room is pretty much locked in, but your Packers, I want to see how that's all going to work out.
It will be interesting to watch here in the preseason and how much run these guys get. Being younger receivers, they may actually play some in this preseason. Jordan Love's first year as a quarterback, he may actually see some time here.
Yeah, they got to get their timing down and all of that. So I think we're going to see some things in the camp, and I want to see it.
And through camp and into the early part of the season, it will be interesting to see who does emerge from that group and how this and what overall this passing game looks like. To see, does it bear any resemblance to the Aaron Rodgers offenses of the past few years with LaFleur?
Right,
or
we have no idea at this point what kind of offense Packers are going to run.
Does getting Aaron Rodgers out of the way, does that unlock a completely different offense for LaFleur now that he is the one who's controlling everything?
More in the offense now. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered by this Green Bay Packers team.
I agree with you. I think that'll be a fun one to watch and a fantasy relevant one to watch.
Absolutely.
We know Christian Watson,
especially for yours truly.
We know Christian Watson has the goods. We know that Romeo Doubs has some potential. He played very well last year when he was the guy, earlier on in the season. Now, granted, that was with Aaron Rodgers throwing to him, but Jordan Love has been throwing to these guys for 2 years now too. And especially guys that, like in practices and in that where he's taking some of the secondary group. Doubs and Watson weren't necessarily with the first group all the time last season because they still had Alan Lazard. They still had Randall Cobb. They still had Mercedes Lewis. But they still had Robert Tonyan. They don't have that anymore. They've got, like you said, a bunch of first and second year guys, literally all first and second year.
Literally. Yeah.
So yeah, that will be an interesting one to watch. I will obviously, as a fan, I'll be keeping my eye on that, but from a fantasy standpoint, I agree with you completely. That is a situation to monitor for everyone going into your redraft drafts. And when those come up, watch what's happening with those Green Bay wide receivers and by extension, yes, they're tight ends and also Jordan Love. Be looking at him.
Absolutely.
Is he a guy? You and I have him in some dynasty.
I did, and I made a trade in one of my dynasty leagues to get Jordan Love.
Mm-hmm.
and I traded one of I traded my first round draft pick and some other guys to get him. So I'm invested in Jordan Love. So hopefully he can be, average at the very least.
So. All right. Okay. Well, let's look around the rest of the league then real quick though, and let's touch on some other position groups that are going to be interesting to watch. We could start right away at the top of the list on the quarterback situation. Now, there might be no more interesting quarterback situation in the league right now than San Francisco and the 49ers. And I'm sure that our good friend Justin Herrera would have many thoughts on this.
Yeah. And let me just enter, because they on TSS Fantasy, I was on there Thursday talking about the Seahawks, but Friday they had the 49ers, and it was like they were all going to – they're all 49er people, and they were almost ready to come to blows because they couldn't agree about that quarterback.
I'm sure that was rough on
situation.
you as
So
a Seahawks fan.
it's going to be extraordinarily interesting what happens with that team, because that might be because they have three quarterbacks. Maybe they don't have one. Kind of situation.
Depending on the report you listen to, and depending on the day, and depending on the mood of whoever's reporting it, Brock Purdy is either no problem, we're not worried at all, going to be there day one, or they have no idea when Brock Purdy will ever play again, and they're waiting to see if Trey Lance and Sam Darnold can make it work. Now they did bring in Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is a guy who has, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he's flamed out at two different places now as a top draft pick, as a high first round quarterback draft pick. He did not work in New York. To be fair to him, nothing was working in New York when he was there.
No.
And he did not necessarily end up working out in Carolina last season. We know that Baker had the lead for a while, and then Baker got let go, and PJ Walker played some. And who knows?
Playing in San Francisco, this is his very last chance.
But according to reports, it's a good chance for him.
It might
there has been some talk that if Purdy's not ready,
Sam Darnold is their starter week one.
There has been some talk that if Purdy's not ready, Darnold very well could be, and is probably likely to be, their starter going into the season. Now, again, depending on the report, depending on the day, Purdy is either going to be ready or not going to be ready. If Brock Purdy is healthy, I think Brock Purdy is their starter and should be. Based on what he did last season, I realize they traded the farm up to get Trey Lance. I know that, they have wanted Trey Lance to be their starter. And from a fantasy standpoint, I know we all are still trying to will that to happen. A young quarterback. We would love to see another one of those guys in the mix. But I think that if Purdy's healthy, Purdy is their guy. If Purdy's not healthy, Sam Darnold has an actual opportunity here. And if Sam Darnold does win that job, as well as anybody else,
than he probably should have. And
he's got Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell and Tyrion Davis-Price. He's got guys in the backfield he can deal with. He's got George Kittle to throw to. He's got Deebo Samuel to throw to. He's got Brandon Ayuk to throw to. He's got Jawan Jennings to throw to. There is a ton of talent on this team for whomever is taking snaps.
Right. They've got their offensive line, no questions there. So, like I said, if Sam Darnold is a starter, I think the 49ers are going to be all right. Maybe
I think they're going to be all right no matter what.
Right. And only issue, not even an issue really, but when you're talking about Brock Purdy, nobody had any film on him. Nobody had any, really any kind of exposure to him.
And now they do.
And now the league does. And so if he's going to be as good as he was a year ago, he's going to have to play better than he did, because people are going to be ready for him now.
There's no question that people are going to, he's not taking anybody by surprise this season, obviously. I think he did prove last year. I mean, and maybe it's a result of the system, but Brock Purdy would not be the first quarterback to be successful because of his coach's system. He would not be the first guy to be successful because Kyle Shanahan is running the offense on his team.
Right.
But I think he proved last year he's a legitimate NFL quarterback. The whole idea of being picked very last in the draft is a moot point at this point.
It is.
Because I mean, Trey Sermon was a 3rd round pick for them, and he's gone. He's in Philadelphia fighting for a roster spot that he probably won't win. Draft position means nothing as soon as these guys get on the field and show you where they belong.
No. 1 year later, it doesn't mean anything. If it did, and Trey Lance, that's a massive failure. Unless he's the starter this year, that's a massive failure.
All you have to do, I mean, and Trey Lance, his injuries have not been his fault. We can't blame him for that. No. But when you look back at things, as a prospect, Trey Lance was a 1st round pick, and as a prospect,
not even a first round pick.
Brock Purdy was a 7th round Mr. Irrelevant pick.
Yeah.
As a prospect, as NFL players, Brock Purdy has proven himself to this point to be much more valuable asset than Trey Lance.
Absolutely.
And so I think if Purdy's, and regardless of what you spent on these guys, we all put a ton of stock in
the guy out there who can play.
We all put a ton of stock in draft position and capital and all that kind of, they spent a whatever pick on this guy. He's got to be, they spent a whatever pick on him. But if a guy outplays him, a guy outplays him. And again, you don't have to look any farther than that same San Francisco 49ers backfield to see Eli Mitchell versus Trey Sermon, who was taken where and who performed well enough to still be there. I don't put a ton of stock into draft capital in terms of what I think a guy's outlook has to be. Even 2 years down, 2 years down the road.
Hot seat, and maybe you can put something on that, but that's certainly not the case in San Francisco.
If traded up. They traded up.
If Trey Lance doesn't make it, then Shanahan's not going to be on the street.
No. And does it suck that they took such a big swing for Trey Lance and it might come up completely empty? It does.
If you're a Seahawks fan as I am, then
you're fine with it. I'm fine with it as a Green Bay fan.
It's a failure.
But if they had made that trade for Trey Lance and he had performed to Brock Purdy standards last year,
everybody would be dancing in the aisles.
Yep.
Would be, praying at church. Thank you so much for this guy.
Play the fanfare and sell the jerseys and be thrilled. If you get that production, you get that production.
That's it.
If you cannot spend that kind of capital, if you cannot pay that kind of price and then get the production that you got out of Purdy, that would have been so much the better.
Yeah.
But either way, you spent capital to try to get a starting quarterback. And you have a starting quarterback right now.
Right. But you have to remember, this is the NFL. It's not the NBA.
No.
The NFL, if you got a guy that's a failure, then you just cut him. And you don't owe him $86.7 million. You might owe him some millions. You obviously will. But you don't have to pay the guy that was whole contract. So
that will be an interesting position to watch. I think it's pretty guy like as my quarterback 2 in a 2 quarterback format. He's definitely a guy that's got streamer potential, fill-in potential for your number 1 starter. I don't put Purdy in the top 12. I don't put Trey Lance in the top 12.
My number 3.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Number 3,
I don't
I'd
see
feel a lot better, to be honest.
It's weird because if any of these guys can really grab this position by the you-know-whats and run with it, and develop, we just talked about the riches of talent that they have on offense
and defense for that matter.
And with Kyle Shanahan calling the plays, it's definitely an area. It's definitely it's a place where we could find a very, very good fantasy quarterback. But we need to get past these injury situations, and we need it to shake out.
Value, no question about
that. Okay, so that's the 49ers quarterback situation. Less exciting from that standpoint in terms of quarterback situations. is what's happening in Indianapolis and Tampa Bay. Now, Indianapolis drafts Anthony Richardson, who the fantasy community is all excited about because the dude can run. He also started, just slightly more games in college than you and I did combined.
That's right.
And has not had a ton of experience, and is not a polished passer as of yet. But he's got literally the best physical prospect we maybe have ever seen at the position, with his testing at the combine,
polished
everything we
is
know.
About as far away as an adjective as you can possibly use with Richardson.
But he's competing with Gardner Minshew, and Gardner Minshew is everybody's darling. He's kind of like everybody's perpetual backup, like favorite guy. If Gardner Minshew's on the team, everybody wants him to be the starter because they just like the dude. Handlebar mustaches will do that for you. But so you've got Richardson and Minshew battling it out in Indy. And then farther south, you have Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. Loosely, I use the term battling it out to see who's going to be the starting quarterback there. Whoops. And what's your thought on either of those positions?
Well, my thought would be, unless it's dynasty, I want nothing to do with any of these guys. In redraft, nothing. And maybe best ball, maybe we could talk about that a little bit. But in dynasty, Richardson obviously has appeal, and he has a reason why he's going first in a lot of these drafts. Not all of them, but there's a reason why people are excited about him going forward. So I could see that, and especially until you get in Tampa, especially because at this point we have no clue whatsoever who's going to be their starter. And I would think that it would probably be Baker Mayfield.
Oh yeah, if I have to put money on it,
if money was involved, and if I didn't place the right bet and I lose my car, then Baker Mayfield pick there. But at this point, we don't know that, and when it comes to even internet, we don't know who's going to be the starter there. So, like I said, in redraft, none of these guys are on my roster at all.
Yeah, no, I'm not worrying about any of that for redraft purposes. Best ball, I'm willing to take probably more of a shot with Anthony Richardson because of the athleticism, because of the explosive potential. Dynasty, I agree with you that Richardson is the call right now for everybody at quarterback because of what he can be. And in Dynasty and rookie drafts, we don't know who any of these people are going to be right now. Like we just said, Trey Sermon, we thought Trey Sermon might have something to offer. He obviously didn't. And then a guy like Isaiah Pacheco comes out of the late rounds and is a very useful fantasy piece. But
I would say that if Trask is available later in a dynasty draft, he might be worth a pickup because any potential starter is.
Yeah, I have no problem rostering Kyle Trask in Dynasty. In fact, I have picked him up off of the waiver wire, weirdly enough, in a couple of leagues.
If you're drafting him, you're probably making a mistake. But if you can get him off the waiver wire, then go ahead and do that.
Because we know that there's an opening there. We know he's young. We know they drafted him to be a developmental quarterback, and there it is.
He sat behind the GOAT, right? So maybe he learned something.
Maybe he picked something up. Yeah.
I don't know if Tom Brady goes around putting his arms around his backups or not.
I don't either. Of these two situations, though, I know that I am not as worried about the Tampa Bay receiving core. Catching passes from either Trask or Mayfield, as I am worried about the Indianapolis receiving core and catching passes from either Minshew or Richardson. I think that the talent level overall between Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Russell Gage, and going down the line, K-Dot at tight end now that they've got rid of Cameron Brate. I think that the receiving talent top to bottom is better in Tampa Bay.
Absolutely.
I think they're going to fare better with what I assume is Baker Mayfield, because I think Baker Mayfield can throw. And I think he proved last season in that weird kind of short little stint in Los Angeles. I think Baker Mayfield played himself into staying in the league last season
He
and
did.
showed that he is a legitimate NFL quarterback. Is he a star? Probably
No.
not. Is he
But
a
that
starter?
ship has sailed a long
Debatable.
time ago.
Is he an NFL quarterback? Definitely. And I think he played himself into a career last season.
Right. If he didn't do what he did in LA, then he's still walking the beat.
Yeah,
right?
no, but I think that last year showed that he can do it in this league. He can play in this league. And I'm not worried about, because of the overall talent, I'm not Otten, Rashad White for that matter.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily fading Colts receivers, but I wasn't necessarily in on Colts receivers to begin with. I'm not a giant Michael Pittman fan. I'm much more comfortable with Michael.
Okay.
I like him as a player.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Fantasy wise, I am much more comfortable with him as a wide receiver 3 or 4 than if I have to rely on him in my lineup.
Right. If you're your wide receiver 2, even, right, you've got problems on your team. Maybe even 3.
So, so I again, a couple of situations to watch. I don't think they're going to shake the needle, fantasy wise. One that I want to talk about real interesting, that I find real interesting, is what do you think? What do you see is happening right now with the Detroit Lions running back situation here? Between David Montgomery being brought in, Jahmyr Gibbs being their draft pick. We know last season they had DeAndre Swift, they had Jamal Williams. Williams ends up surprise leading the entire league in rushing touchdowns, was a great first and second down, short goal line type back. DeAndre Swift then was their major pass catching and flashy and outside kind of back. It looks like they may have the same kind of ability for that setup this year between David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. We know who we'd seen in the past with Green Bay and with Detroit. Jamal Williams isn't limited to that first and second down role. He can catch passes. And DeAndre Swift wasn't necessarily limited to having to be an outside player, although he is nowhere near as effective an inside runner as a lot of other running backs are. DeAndre Swift does most of his damage out in space, catching the ball or running to the outside. But we have David Montgomery, who again has shown in his past, but the possible Jamal Williams guy, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who again can play pretty much everything, looks to possibly be taking that DeAndre Swift role, or at least has the potential for it. Do we think we see the Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift split with Montgomery and Gibbs? Do we think one of these guys takes the job outright? Do we think that it's a timeshare split? What are your thoughts, or what's your outlook here for this Detroit Lions running back situation and running back depth chart as we head into training camps here?
Well, the way things work out in the NFL nowadays, as we've talked many times before, it's pretty much it's a 2-back system now. The days of the one running back system are pretty much off the vine now.
Right.
And so I could see both of these guys being potentially RB2s, potentially. And right now, trying to decide which of these guys is the higher guy is probably, you're playing with fire here because you don't know right now. But if I was drafting I would probably feel comfortable with either of these guys in my backfield, given that offense. And so I wouldn't have a problem drafting either one of these guys.
No, I agree. I mean, we saw them be useful last year. This backfield was useful last year, no matter which piece you had. Now, obviously, there was always the injury with DeAndre Swift, but that has moved east to Philadelphia right now.
Right.
We don't necessarily have those same kinds of concerns with Montgomery and Gibbs. Montgomery, everybody misses some time with injuries. Everybody's going to have that. We don't necessarily have the same worry that we had with DeAndre Swift. That we don't have that same worry with Montgomery and with Gibbs. it sure looks on the surface, if we're all, in our primitive minds looking for patterns here, it sure looks like we have a replay of what happened last year where we have an early down back and a passing guy. It sure looks that way. We don't know yet, and that's why I'm interested to watch this play out here now in preseason. And we're probably not going to see a ton of it in preseason games, but to watch reports coming out of camp, watch who's running with the ones, who's running with the twos, who's running the 7-on-7 drill or whatever, versus, who's off with the line running, inside drills. So from a best ball standpoint, I am fine with either one of these guys because I think that both of them are spike potential shots in the dark. We don't know. I don't want to rely on either one of these guys as a top 2 option, but I like either of them on my roster as a spike potential guy week in and week out. I think in terms of the height of that spike, I'm more excited with Gibbs because we just don't know yet. And because they drafted him so highly, they brought him in.
He's a first-round draft pick, and you don't put that.
You don't take a running back in the first round unless you plan to use it.
Right. Just like Bijan Robinson, they're going to play him. And unless he's clearly outplayed by Montgomery.
Unless he's clearly outplayed by Montgomery, which is not out of the realm of possibility.
I mean,
you're talking about a guy that's played football for a long time and knows what he's doing.
If I could take Montgomery later, I will do that.
David Montgomery scored 264 fantasy points, PPR fantasy points in 2020. I mean, this is a guy that can score some points, that can play some football and can play some fantasy football for you, and can move the needle for you if he is the guy. So I'm not worried about having him. I mean, you're talking about the number 4 overall running back in 2020, fantasy wise. Right. David Montgomery has something to offer, and it's not limited to just first and second down.
That's what I'm saying. You can't determine right now who's going to have what role.
So I am fine taking either of these guys in a best ball draft. Now we will want to watch this as it gets closer to redraft season, as we get closer to our home leagues. Watch how these guys are used. Watch what reports are. Watch all of that to give you a better idea of where these guys should go in your redraft format. But in best ball, if either one of these guys comes to me, I am fine jumping on that because I think they both have spike potential all season.
Right.
All right. Honestly, we could talk about the Miami Dolphins running back situation, but I don't think we all know what that running back situation is yet because I think we're all waiting for Dalvin Cook to sign down there and further muddy the waters.
Right. So they need a bigger, bus to bring all the running backs in there.
We could talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. We could talk about the Chiefs wide receivers, but we could always talk about the Chiefs wide receivers. Here's my one comment, and I'll let you make a comment if you feel like it, but on the Chiefs wide receiver core, I am not excited or jumping on any Chiefs wide receiver individually because I know that Patrick Mahomes can and will spread the ball out.
Right.
Patrick Mahomes is one of the in best ball, in my best ball leagues. Patrick Mahomes is the one quarterback that I have been getting that I have not necessarily made a concerted effort to stack with anybody.
That's right.
You don't have to.
Yeah, right. Because you can't get Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes as a stack. You're not.
If you can get them as a stack, that's great. But there's no receiver on that roster right now that is.
I don't see how that's possible. Given where you'd have to draft to get either one of those guys.
I do have him on. I do have them both on at least one roster. I do. One of my DraftKings the $10 million millionaire draft challenge on DraftKings. I do have Mahomes and Kelce on one of my teams there.
Well,
and again, it was Kelce first, then Mahomes on the wraparound.
Absolutely.
That's the way you have to do it.
That's the only way that could possibly work.
Yeah. And it's the only way you're getting that stack. But then outside of that, I do have Mahomes. I do have I've got Mahomes on 4 different teams. I think 4 or 5 different teams right now of my best ball teams. I'm not going out of my way to stack him with Kadarius Toney. I'm not jumping on the Sky Moore bandwagon. If I can get one of those guys at good value, I will take it, because any of them has as good a shot as anybody else of being the spike guy that week. MVS, who I've talked about before as a Packer fan, and I know what he's going to be. I'm not excited about him. If he falls to me at the right spot, though, and I've got Mahomes, yeah, I'll stack that. But you don't need to. I'm not going out of my way to try to grab chief wide receivers to stack with Patrick Mahomes, because I know that I'm going to be fine in and of himself with Patrick Mahomes as my quarterback. Some other quarterbacks, you want to try to reach out and grab their top stack guy.
Right. And we've talked about that. You can go back and look at some of our episodes. Well, one in specifically where we talk about best ball and some of them stacks you might be looking for.
But not worried about Patrick Mahomes if I don't get a wide receiver of his, because I don't need it.
He's one of the few quarterbacks who is pretty much bulletproof. Doesn't matter doesn't matter who his running or his wide receivers are, as long as he's got Kelsey.
I'll tell you what I've been more excited about from a Mahomes standpoint, and in terms of trying to stack him, I have been more excited on the teams where I have Mahomes if I can get Jerick McKinnon as a running back, say,
that is totally doable.
Over the last few weeks of last season, Jerick McKinnon was an absolute
and he was on my team.
Juggernaut.
Absolute beast.
And you know he's the pass catching back in that on that team.
He's the pass catching guy, and they could play 2 running backs. We talk about 2 running backs.
And they have, and they do.
Kansas City will do that, and so both of those guys have value.
Week 14, week 15, 32.4 and 34.2 fantasy points in those 2 weeks for Mr. Jerick McKinnon as a running back, as the not nominal starter running back on that team.
He was the league winner a year ago.
Now, I don't want to have to try to suss that out and figure out that if whether or not he's going to go off in week 5.
No.
But in a best ball format where I don't have to try and track that down, it just gets tracked down for me. I will take a couple of 30-point explosions out of my 4th string running back.
Absolutely.
I'm fine with that.
Absolutely.
And if he had a big day, Mahomes had a big day. So that's the stack I'm more worried about there. But I am interested to see how this wide receiver situation shakes out in Kansas City. I will be watching, because if a guy emerges as the non-Travis Kelce guy, we know that they can support 2 absolute top level guys. They did it with Tyreek Hill. Now, they don't have a Tyreek Hill on that team, but if they've got a guy that takes command of those targets opposite Travis Kelce, like Tyreek Hill did, that player would have a ton of value over the other guys on that team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's another position that, like I said, that's another position group I'll be looking for. Before we get out of here, Kevin, let's tell the people where they can find you, what you've got going on, and how things are shaking out for you.
All right. So you can always find me at Twitter, Kevin62, WILSEA. And as I mentioned during the show, I was on TSS Fantasy on Thursday, which you could still check out that episode where I talk about my Seattle Seahawks and what I look forward into their season, both real and in fantasy. So you're going to want to check that out. And I have an article out on the Belly Up Fantasy website, my top drops. And because we're getting to the point where fantasy playoffs are 6 weeks away.
Fast approaching,
and you have players that you don't want cluttering up your roster. I named some of those players, so you definitely want to get over there and check that out. And tonight, Vince and I, of course, have our the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball show, and we are going to name 2 pitchers who are sleepers and 2 pitchers who are below 50% owned that you should, they're probably on rosters, but they should be on your roster if you can get them. So you definitely want to check that out. And so Belly Up Fantasy website, get over there, check that out. Articles aplenty on fantasy baseball if you're into that. Plus, you've got articles coming out, I'm sure, on fantasy football and everything else. This is the time where you need to get over there. I get questions on Facebook. Well, who should I follow for fantasy football advice? Bam. Belly Up Fantasy. That's
Right
what
here.
you need to follow.
Guys
Go
on
over there, check it out.
bellyupfantasy.com. That's right.
Yep,
That's
that's
right.
it. Right there. So get over there, check it out.
Yeah, check out that Sports Stove tonight, guys. Yeah, hey, you're set to maybe take a stranglehold here on first place if things shake out for you today. You're leading your matchup here. It looked like you've got a good chance to win. It's not a given, but you've got a shot to win. And if you can win, it looks like Dale's going down again. He has hit the skids here, so you could take an
he needs to
outright
blame
lead in
Vince
this league.
because Vince said he was a fraud, and ever since he said that, he hadn't won a game. So,
ouch! Family feud.
Dad, got called out by son, and it hadn't worked out very well for him since.
Speaking of Vince is in a tough battle right now with speaking of TSS fantasy with our good friend Nick from over there. But yeah, it's Stovey's he's in a battle right now. He's only up by 24 coming into today.
That's why. Yeah, I just saw him make a free agent move. I haven't seen what it is yet, but
Who he picked up, yeah.
So Vince is definitely panicking right now to try and win that matchup.
I'm hoping that his panic is well warranted, because if he can lose and I can win, I think I can leapfrog him again in the standings. I'm a game behind him at the moment, but my head-to-head record against him is 2-0, I believe. So yeah, so keep an eye on that, everybody. We'll trust us. We will keep you updated if things are going well for us in the fantasy baseball league.
You definitely are going to want to check that out. That is definitely newsworthy events going on in the Belly Up, sports. All right, baseball.
Find us both on Twitter here. You can find me at STT Chase FFB. You can find Kevin at Kevin62WILSEA. We'll see. For that, otherwise, get over to bellyupfantasysports.com. Check out all the great content over there on fantasy baseball, like Kevin said, in the ramp up here to the playoffs coming up as we come out of the All-Star break. Check out now that we're into football preseason, we are in training camps. There will be plenty of team reviews coming out, or previews coming out. There will be, rankings will be updated. There will be all kinds of news going out there. So, get over there and check it out. And as always, you will be able to find us right here, back the same bat time, same bat channel next week. Until then, I hope everybody has a good week. We are going to bid you adieu and say Slàinte mhath.
Have a great week.
We'll see you next week, Kevin.
All right.